Hello, Robo-Capitalists. Hope you're well. Just here from New Orleans, the New Orleans Investment Conference. And I was just had a fun experience. Like I said on the last video, I went up and did a panel discussion. I think that last video was prior to doing the panel discussion with Jim Grant and Brent Johnson. And it was really cool. I was able to go up there in front of the whole crowd, tell Jim Grant that he had really had a positive impact on my life and the way I see the world. And as a thank you, I gave the Jim Grant an official hashtag end the Fed hat. And he thought that was pretty cool. He actually put it on and he took it with him. He really liked it a lot. So that was a very fun experience. But what I wanted to go over with you guys is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. And it's something that I'm going to include in the presentation that I'll be doing tomorrow morning. So if you're here in New Orleans, this will be a preview of some of the things that I will be talking about. So let's go ahead and let's do a screen share. And yeah, we want the entire screen. Okay, cool. And I'm going to minimize this, and then let's maximize. This is from my PowerPoint presentation. And we always talk about the global elite and the World Economic Forum, the IMF, and a lot of the politicians and the useful idiots, the people that are in charge of these giant corporations, the Benioff types and whatnot. And we always say, okay, they're pushing this agenda, the Great Reset agenda, we'll say, or now it's just Build Back Better. But how does that work? Because there's so many pieces of the puzzle that it's tough to really get your head around all of the components. So I had my editor or editors go ahead and put this together, and I kind of just wrote it out or scribbled it out, I should say, on a legal pad. That's what I always do, and I gave it to him. And then we kind of organized my thoughts in what you see in front of you. So let me walk you through this. It's the vision of today's Marxist / central planner. So again, I'm talking about the useful idiots. I'm talking about the people that are in charge of these global corporations that are basically disciples of Klaus and Bigglesworth, the World Economic Forum, the IMF, etc. One thing we do know definitively is that they are not only central planners, but they're Marxists. All we have to do is just look at what they say and just try to think through kind of the end game and how it would play out if they're able to achieve their objectives that they openly admit. And although they don't say that it's Marxism or central planning, to anyone paying attention, this is blatantly obvious. So in order to create a socialist utopia, a worker's paradise, I think you'd have to control two things. Number one, the economy. Number two, the people or society at large. So let's start with the economy. How would they do that? Okay, well, first, and I'm not saying that these components are implemented strictly through their power and control. A lot of these things, I think, would come to fruition even without the influence of the global elite. I just think the global elite are going to see a crisis and they're not going to let it go to waste. They're going to use the manipulation, or I guess a kind word would say influence, they have on the people that are in power to achieve their objectives. So let's walk through this. We've got a central bank digital currency. And you guys know from watching my videos, that's basically when we all have an account with the Fed. The non-bank entities and the bank entities, for that matter, in the real economy, they all have an account with the Fed. So think about the last time you got your bank statement. Your bank had a lot of information on the transactions you do daily. And remember, they're getting that in real time. If you swipe your debit card today for a coffee, and then that a few hours later, you go onto your online uh, web portal, whatever, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and you're going to see that transaction. Okay, right now that's decentralized to a point because Bank of America isn't going to share that information with Wells Fargo and vice versa. But if we all had accounts with the Federal Reserve, then the Fed, one centralized entity in control of the government, or that is being controlled by the government or influenced, let's say, they're going to have access to all of your transactions in real time. And you guys know that they can also, once they ban cash, they can take interest rates negative. They can control what you spend and where you spend your money, or what you spend your money on and where you spend your money. They can control interest rates at the individual level. That means monetary policy, not just for society, but for every Joe and Jane, every small and mid-sized business. And I think that they're going to issue, or they're going to determine the interest rates and who is getting credit by your credit score. But more on that in a moment. I want to stick with the topic, the controlling the economy. So if they have all of these transactions in real time happening all around the economy, and if they were to take artificial intelligence and have AI calculate or use this data to calculate and determine where we as a society should be allocating scarce resources with alternative uses, they could take control of the means of production. And theoretically, again, this is them talking, not me. I think this is just kind of their thought process. They could theoretically take control of the means of production, and they would have the data that they would have received from the free market with price signals. So you've got price discovery, or you should, in a free market. And then those prices give you signals. And those signals go to the entrepreneur or the producers, and they determine where the end products, goods, and services should go, and what the raw materials that are scarce should be used for. And this is why free market capitalism is the most efficient, or one of the main reasons, it's the most efficient system we have. But the collapse of the Soviet Union shows us that without those price signals, without that data, it doesn't end well. And I think they, the global elite, are smart enough to know that. So how do you get the best of both worlds? Again, their view, not mine. Meaning, how do you take control of the means of production from those greedy capitalists, while at the same time allocating resources with alternative uses, scarce resources? How do you do that efficiently? Well, you could do that through a central bank digital currency because you have enough data coming in. You have all the data coming in, by the way. And then you could, in their minds, layer over artificial intelligence. There, you've solved the problem. And I think they believe that artificial intelligence could most likely allocate those resources better than the free market. Because you have to understand where the position they're coming from. They believe that we are stupid. Every single one of you watching this video right now, that you are stupid, that you're just a dumb rube in the real economy. You're a knuckle dragger. You're a mouth breather. And you're not enlightened, nor are you intelligent enough to know what's best for you, let alone actually do what is best for not only you, but the economy. Therefore, they should have the control because they are the enlightened few. They're the intelligentsia. They're the ones that have had this epiphany. They're the ones that are intelligent enough to determine and decipher right from wrong. So this whole mindset is, by the way, goes back to eugenics, But it's really, in its simplest form, the belief that we're smart, you're stupid. Therefore, there should be a very select group of individuals that are controlling everything. So, isn't artificial intelligence the ultimate expression of that view? I would argue yes. So, I don't think it's a stretch to say that if you're a Marxist, if you're a central planner, you look at central bank digital currency and artificial intelligence and say, aha, this could be a great solution. The next thing, 3 here, they need to destroy small and mid-sized businesses. They've done a pretty good job of that. So all of those mom and pop businesses that were providing goods in 2019, they all get wiped out, and now everyone just buys what they need from Amazon. Okay, well, if you're the global elite, is it easier to influence or manipulate 100 giant corporations or millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of small and mid-sized businesses that are decentralized across the globe? The answer is obvious. You want to consolidate everything in as few mega corporations as possible, and then all you have to do is control those mega corporations. But remember, we can't have aggregate demand go down. Oh no, because at the end of the day, they're not only Marxists, but they're heavily influenced by Keynesianism. They're all Keynesians. So I think that while they're creating regulations to eliminate the small and mid-sized business and consolidate that to these mega corporations, they're giving out stimmies because they don't want the individual entrepreneur to run anything, but they don't want them to have any less money, quote unquote, or I should say dollars, because then that reduces aggregate demand. So you basically create a corporatist welfare state where the individuals in the real economy are surviving on the welfare of the government, and then the government is influencing to a great degree these corporations who have control of pretty much the means of production, the goods and services, and how those goods and services are allocated, and maybe more importantly, who they're allocated to. So you combine this control. Let's just assume that in the United States there were 10 mega corporations that provided 90% of the goods and services. So that gives you a lot of control, doesn't it? And then especially when you combine that with a central bank digital currency, which gives a central authority, either the Treasury, the government, or maybe the Federal Reserve, maybe they combine the balance sheet, who knows? But it gives a central group of individuals, most likely who are not elected, it gives them the power of credit creation. So who gets credit and who doesn't? If you control 90% of the goods and services in the United States, as well as the credit creation, you pretty much control everything. So then your problem becomes from an economic standpoint, and then that gives you an incredible amount of control over society at large. But you will have an uprising. At a certain point in time, you understand that people are hardwired to not only want freedom and liberty for themselves, but probably more importantly for their kids and grandkids, for future generations. And they will do almost anything to ensure that the next generation has more opportunity, not only from a standpoint of wealth and standard of living, but I believe from a standpoint of freedom and personal liberty as well, that they'll go to almost any length. So you've got to control the people in a way that above and beyond how you're controlling them through economic means. So how do you do this? Well, if you've got a central bank digital currency, if they're issuing all the credit, how are they issuing the credit? most likely not through a credit score, most likely through a social credit score. And why is this any different than the way the commercial banks operate now? Because they have to operate on profit and loss. They have to have equity. They have to have positive equity. They can't be insolvent, or they can't issue any more loans. They go bust. But a central bank, not so. If you guys remember my conversation I had with Richard Werner, he was very clear that he believed central banks could run with negative equity. They could operate where they're technically insolvent using GAAP accounting, generally accepted accounting principles. So if you're an entity that can issue credit and you don't have to be paid back, then why do you need to use a credit score? You can pretty much do the bidding of the government and just extend credit. Maybe it's in the form of an auto loan, the form of a mortgage, the form of a loan to start up a business. You can give that to whomever you like, whomever has political favor and pull at the time. So also you can use that to, let's say, eliminate any dissenting views. From a standpoint of, if you wanted to get that car loan or if you wanted to get that mortgage, you better wear your mask, or else you better obey. You want to go ahead and stand up for freedom? You want to value freedom more than liberty? You want to go ahead and protest? Yeah, go ahead and do that, but it's going to lower your social score. And the next time you go to get that mortgage, you're not going to pay the 3% rate. No, 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 no. Are you crazy? You're a domestic terrorist. It wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be just. It wouldn't be for the greater good if we were to give you the same interest rate as someone who is playing by the rules, someone who is obeying the system, and someone who is putting the collective above their individual interests or the interest of their family and friends. So I think that this is one of the first steps, and it doesn't happen in this sequence. I think these things can happen simultaneously, or they can start to flourish. They can start to be more and more accepted in the mainstream simultaneously. It doesn't have to. You don't have to have a central bank digital currency and then all of a sudden now we implement or start talking about a social credit score. I think they can happen at the same time, is what I'm saying. But then you have to do more than that, because initially I don't think a social credit score would fly in the United States if it was just implemented without something else, or prior to the public being in a mental state or frame of mind where they would be receptive to this type of control or micromanagement of their lives. So how do you solve that problem? Well, I think that brings us to propaganda. You guys can see the word on the screen, and keep it YouTube friendly here. So if you study the propaganda they had in the 1930s, the very first thing they did is they encouraged society to completely abandon critical thinking. And the only thing that they wanted society to prioritize was the way you feel. They don't think about things. That's nonsense. That's old school thinking. That's really an antiquated belief system that was just held by your parents and grandparents. But we've evolved since then, and now we realize that the only thing that really matters is how you feel. That just the way you think, that doesn't impact your daily life. And you can see that playing out everywhere right now in today's society. And I know that if you guys are watching this from America or from the Western world in general, that you're shaking your head saying, oh yeah, George, I see exactly what you're saying. And then the next step is, and again, these can occur at the same time, is to influence media, education, and entertainment. Do I need to expand on that at all? I mean, you could just drop the mic right there, so to speak. And it is obvious that what we're seeing in the media today is just strictly propaganda. And unfortunately, with education and entertainment, it's the same. And throw sports in there with entertainment. It has nothing to do with basketball. It just has to do with pushing some sort of nonsense agenda. And it's the exact same thing that we saw in Germany, we'll say, in the 1930s. It's identical. It's no different. And then you need a boogeyman. So we know what it was back then. The question is, who's it going to be today? In my opinion, it's going to be people who value freedom, and that may take the form of the people who choose not to take the medicine. And you see this playing out where the mainstream media, the president, for heaven's sakes, they set up this persona. They set up this they set up this caricature of the people who choose not to get the medicine as though they are the root of all evil. Every problem that we have today in society, whether it's supply chain issues, whether it's inflation, whether it's issues with China, it all is laid at the feet of those who choose not to get the medicine. So you see that this could possibly be the boogeyman they're looking for. Why do they need that? They need that to unify the rest of the group. And you asked the question how that group in Germany was very successful at doing it. It didn't start out that way in the beginning of the 1930s, but it ended up that way at the end of the 1930s because they used these three things so effectively. And I don't think the global elite are ignorant to how successful those types of campaigns were. And they used very similar tactics in Stalinist Russia and with Mussolini. And throughout history, they've used these tactics. So they're really nothing new. So then you also have to create divisiveness within a society. You have to get people that should be having each other's backs, fighting each other. Stalin was brilliant at this, and it's kind of the mantra of Marxism at its core, that you've got the haves and the have-nots. You've got the workers, and then you have the the proletariat, I believe, and the bourgeoisie. These are the two groups. And so you create this divisiveness, which kind of builds up the energy within your team and motivates them to go out and kind of fight, figuratively speaking. So is there anything that is more divisive than creating this society where you don't even have to ask someone's political opinion? You don't have to ask them what news station they watch. All you have to do is see whether or not they're wearing a mask. And if they're wearing a mask, you in your head, you say, okay, they believe this, this, and this. Now, whether that's right or wrong, it is what it is. And if they're not wearing a mask, then you say, oh, they believe this, this, and this. To having something that we would wear on our face that basically just announces to the whole world what our belief system is, you would actually have to get to know that person. Well, once you get to know that person, then you can differentiate between the individual and their views, and maybe their views and their character. But when you're just looking at that mask, it kind of dehumanizes people and creates that divisiveness that they need to implement their objectives. Then the next thing I think, and this is something we're seeing play out right now, is the foot in the front door theory. I've talked about this on my channel several times. If you guys aren't familiar with it, this is a study I believe is done in California where they took a group of people in a neighborhood and they asked a certain group, the first portion of people, they said, okay, will you put up this small sign in your front yard? It's something like don't speed. And they took the individuals who said yes, and they put them in a category. The next group, they said, will you sign this petition to put up a extra speed bump or something? And so they took the individuals that responded yes to that question, and they put them in a category. And then they took a group that they didn't ask anything of. Then they went to all three of those groups and they said, we'd like you to put this giant sign in your front yard that says, please don't speed. Something similar to the small sign. The group that didn't agree to anything at the beginning, less than 20% of the people agreed to put the big sign in the front yard. The group that signed the petition, 55%. The group that agreed to the small sign, 76%. So it's this human conditioning where if you get someone to agree to something small, the probability that they agree to something larger is exponentially higher. So if we have gotten society to agree to locking themselves in a cage, or if you look at Australia, locking yourself in the house and only leaving for an hour a day, if we can get people to agree to wear masks everywhere, to wear 10 masks, to wear 15 masks, to wear a mask while they're driving in their car all by themselves, if we can get people to agree to shut down their business and just take handouts from the government, if we can get people to agree to inject a foreign substance into their body, if we can get business owners who are still in business to actually choose or to legally mandate that businesses not serve a certain section of the American population, basically Jim Crow 2.0 laws. If we can get people to agree to that, what's next? Because that's not just the foot through the front door. That's the whole entire person and an army through the front door. So where I think this goes is the cerveza sickness could be temporary, you say, and I hope you're right. I think we'll have another something because we usually have these things once every 3-4 years, going back to 2000. But I think the ultimate is going to be climate change. Now, like I always say, I'm not for or against. I don't really get into it too much. And you could say, well, this is good, this is bad. The bottom line is the global elite that we're talking about, they don't care about the environment. They don't care about you. They don't care about society. They're sociopaths. They care about one thing and one thing only, and that's gaining power and control. It's pursuing their own self-interest at any cost and destroying whatever they need to destroy that may be standing in their way. So what better argument for giving the central planners the power they desire to micromanage every individual in the economy than through climate change? Because if people were willing to lock themselves in a cage in 2020 for 6 months, well, why wouldn't they be willing to do that once every 6 months for the next 20 years? It's all for the greater good. And if you don't, then humanity is going to go the way of the dinosaur. If you don't, we're all going to be extinct. If you don't, global GDP is going to decrease by 50%, and the human race will no longer exist. And you say, well, why would they want to do that? Again, because that gives them the power and the control that they need, not only over the economy, but over people in general. That allows them to create a socialist utopia where they control everything. But assuming their intentions are good, then this is how they move society forward. assuming their intentions are bad, then this is how they become a global dictator. This is how they achieve global dominance. I mean, it's straight out of a James Bond film. But unfortunately, we're seeing it play out potentially in real life. So as far as their motivation, I'll let you be the judge. There are no certainties. It's just a matter of probabilities. But I think that regardless of whether their intentions are as pure as the driven snow or completely I don't want to use too strong of language here, but or their intentions are, let's say, just they have bad intentions. Regardless, that I think these are the steps they'll try to implement in order to take us to that workers' paradise. So knowing that, we can look for it in the news, we can look for it, and then we can offer a narrative that is contrary to their narrative to hopefully win the battle, figuratively speaking. Because the good news is Hayek did it in the 40s when the United States was headed towards socialism. Friedman did it in the 1970s when the United States was headed in that direction. So if those two guys, along with a lot of others, can really move the needle back then, all of us collectively can move the needle today. But we just have to understand the urgency, and we have to come together as a group and do everything that we can to stand up and fight for freedom, liberty, and free market capitalism. So I'll go back to the there we go. Hopefully you guys, yeah, good. You're able to see that screen share. So hopefully that kind of gives you some food for thought. And maybe you agree with some of that. Maybe you agree with all of it. Maybe you agree with none of it. But at least hopefully it'll make you think and try to determine where we are and what the intentions are. And therefore you can take action to make sure that your kids and grandkids have the same level, if not more, freedom than you have enjoyed over the past 3 or 4 decades. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, your evening. I appreciate you hanging out with me on this live stream. As always, make sure you stand up for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism. I'll see you in the next video.